So a man arrives at the gates of heaven. St. Peter, of course, is always at the gates of heaven, and he's ready to greet. And he says, "What's your religion?" The guy says, "Methodist." "Methodist, great. Peace unto you. Now I want you to go down to room 24. It's one door past the Scientologists. And as you pass room number 8, shh, be very quiet." Another man shows up. "What religion are you?" "Hindu." "Hindu? Namaste. And you're going to be going down to room 18, one door before the Jainists. And before you get there, you're going to pass room number 8. Shh, be very quiet." Third man arrives at the gate. "Religion?" "Jewish." "Jewish, shalom aleichem." "Lechem shalom," says the man. "You're going to be heading down to room 27, right? Just past the Catholics. And as you go past room number 8, be very quiet." Now, the Jewish guy's not going to let this go without questioning it. That's what we do. So he says, "I just got to know. I understand. We didn't get along down on earth, so it makes sense we have different rooms up here. But why do we have to be quiet when we go past room number 8? "Well," says St. Peter, "that's where we keep the Jehovah's Witnesses, and they think they're the only ones here." Right? You could actually fill that in with ultra-Orthodox Jews or evangelical Christians or most any religion, actually, thinks they're the only one here. It's harder and harder to get into heaven. To borrow a quote from our Christian brothers and sisters book, right? It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. I would just modify that, and I would say it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than these days for any of us to get into heaven. It's a harder and harder bar to hurdle to get into heaven, right? You got to be in the right religion at the right time, with the right denomination, the right prescribed actions, the right intention. The list goes on and on. It is a very narrow doorway to get into Olam Haba, as we say in Hebrew, to get into heaven, and every religion seems to think that they hold the only key. It's not just Jehovah's Witnesses. Again, it's almost, you could fill in the blank. Not all, but most religions act this way. People come up to me, Jews come up to me all the time and say, "Rabbi, right, I don't know what to do with evangelical Christianity and their belief that I, as a Jew, am going to hell. I don't know what to do with Mormons and their converting Jews posthumously going out to the graves. It's offensive to me," right? They will say to me, to which I always respond, "If I could care less, I would, but I can't, because as a Jew, I don't care what somebody believes. I care how I am treated," right? It doesn't matter somebody else's theology. We can agree to disagree. I happen to think that they're wrong, but that's fine. We can still be friends, good friends, brothers and sisters, and I have many evangelical Christians that I would call brothers and sisters, really. What I have a problem with are my own people believing I'm going to hell. Right? Ultra-Orthodox Jews, Haredi Jews, maybe they don't believe as a Jew, as a non-Orthodox Jew, I'm going to hell, but certainly they're not the ones showing up at shul like my Christian brothers and sisters do. They wouldn't step foot in this synagogue. I have friends who won't come to my house to eat. I don't know anybody who's Catholic or Mormon or Buddhist who would turn down an invitation to come to my house. I was on a panel a while back, and one of the rabbis refused to call me a rabbi because I wasn't branded in his tradition as an ultra-Orthodox, Haredi, as we say in Hebrew, Jew. But my good friends who aren't Jewish, right, are happy to call me rabbi. They revere me as a rabbi. That's what I have more of a problem with. I don't have time in my life to be ashamed of other people's religions, to busy myself with other religious mishigas craziness, because we got plenty of it right here at home. And I got my hands full with our own mishigas. But what bothers me more than any of that, again, ultra-Orthodox Jews have the right to be wrong. We can agree to disagree. What bothers me is when my own people who aren't ultra-Orthodox, define themselves, have allowed themselves to be defined by ultra-Orthodox. Oftentimes you hear, or all the time you hear, Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, Renewal Jews call themselves what? Non-Orthodox. I'm non-Orthodox. 10% of the Jewish people are Orthodox. Does it make sense to define yourself by the 10% that you're not? I want them to call themselves non-conservative. I'm non-reform. I'm non-reconstructionist. Why should we be the ones who are living in reaction? It makes no sense. But what really bothers me is how Orthodoxy, ultra-Orthodoxy, even traditional Judaism, if you want to call it that, has really defined who's a good Jew. Because so many times, so many of you, so many of my people come up to me and say, speaking about themselves, Rabbi, I'm not a good Jew. I say to them, what do you mean you're not a good Jew? And they'll say, well, I don't observe Shabbat, the Sabbath, like it should be. I don't keep kosher like it should be. I don't daven, pray 3 times a day. This is what Judaism has boiled down to. When we talk about who is a good Jew, it comes down to the Holy Trinity of davening and Shabbos and kashrut. There are tons of mitzvot, 613, hundreds, thousands of commandments in our tradition. These are but a few, but we have come to define ourselves as either good or bad by whether or not we uphold these 3. And by the way, these 3 are getting harder and harder to uphold all the time. It says in the Torah, right, remember Shabbat. Any of you who know something about Judaism know it didn't end with remember Shabbat. Now there's all kinds of rules upon rules upon rules of what to do, what not to do. Kashrut, don't boil a baby goat in its mother's milk. If only that were all we had to do. Now it's rule upon rule upon rule, and this one's kashrut certificate is good, and this one is not, and these Jews will not eat at these Jews because they serve this, that, or the other. And davening prayer, it's getting harder to cross the hurdle, to cross the bar every single day. We are pricing Jews out of Judaism financially. We're pricing Jews out of Judaism religiously. And we're pricing Jews and all of us out of heaven by this kind of mindset and living this way. That's the bad news. I'll never end with the bad news. Now we have good news. The good news is they're wrong. That's not Judaism. That's not what it boils down to. At least that's not what it says in today's Torah portion. So if you were following along in today's Torah portion, you might have heard us reading about or read, I think it was a little before our reading, about the Leviim, the Levites. Last week I spoke about the 3 different classifications in ancient Israel. You had the Kohanim, the priestly class, who they ran the spiritual aspects of the original temple. You had the Yisraelim, the Israelites, the average, as I like to call us, the Jews in the pews. They're the ones who showed up, who brought the sacrifices, who did commerce and made the whole thing work. And then you had the Leviim, the Levites, right? As I said before, my peeps, Baruch ha-Levite, ha-Levi. What did the Levites traditionally do? They ran the Torah, the temple. Without them, the temple would not work. We read, Kach et ha-Leviim mitoch b'nei Yisrael, v'tiharta otam. Take the Levites from among you and prep them. Get them ready. Why? How? Because they are going to make this temple work. They're going to clean all up of the icky, gooey, yucky, bloody guts and stuff from the sacrifices. They're the ones who are mopping the floors. They're the ones who are making the temple function, the plumbing and the details that most of us don't want to pay attention to. The Levites were the ones who stood guard. They had guard duty. They were the ones who protected us. They were the ones who served. We read, they were the ones, V'hayu la'avod et avodat Adonai. They are the ones who served God through avodah, through literally, not prayer. We translate avodah as prayer, but not prayer, through work, through hard work, through selfless work, nonetheless through work. Last week I spoke about how each one of these roles is beautiful, and all of us in our lives have roles that we are here that are uniquely ours and ours alone to live out. And the real destruction in life comes when you try and live out somebody else's purpose, somebody else's role, and you don't live out your own. Today I want to talk about what all 3 of these had in common, which I already mentioned, right? What do the Kohanim, the priestly class, and the Leviim, the caretakers, and the Israelim all have in common? That they are all here to serve. La'avod et avodat Adonai. Judaism sees this as the foundation of what it means to be a good Jew. There's an argument in the Talmud, and the rabbis bring different prophets who had lived well prior to the Talmud to prove their point. And one says you can boil Judaism down to these 6 things. Isaiah said, what does God want from us? To walk righteously, to speak upright, to despise greed, to not take bribes, to not stand idly by bloodshed, and to not shut your eyes to evil. Micah, the prophet Micah, said, you can boil it down to 3. What does God want? To do justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly before God. Jeremiah said, I'll take it a step further. I'll reduce it to two principles. What does God want? To do justice and to do what is right. And this week's Torah portion says no. There is but one mitzvah, one commandment, one charge for each and every one of us as Jews to fulfill, la'avod et avodat Adonai, to serve God through serving the temple, through serving our community, through serving each other. Or in the words of perhaps the smartest man to have ever walked this earth, Albert Einstein, strange is our situation here on earth, said Einstein. Each of us comes for a short visit, not knowing why. Yet sometimes we seem to devise a purpose. We create a means. From the standpoint of daily life, however, there's one thing we can be sure of, that man is here for the sake of men, that human beings are here for the sake of human beings. Above all else, wrote Einstein, whose smile I depend, and well-being, my own happiness depends, are the countless unknown souls whose fate my soul is connected to. Many times a day, said Einstein, I realize how much my outer life and my inner life are dependent upon the labors of my fellow men and women, both living and dead, and how earnestly I must exert myself in order to give as much as I have been given. Man is here for the sake of men. Human beings are here for the sake of other human beings. Judaism is not that complicated. It's not about the labels. It's not about the brand or the kosher certificate or the do this or the don't do that. It's not about the dress, the garb, the hats. It doesn't matter. From a Jewish perspective, above all else, what are we called to do as Jews? We're called to show up in our lives, in our communities, in our families, in our country, and serve. This past week, I did too many funerals. One of the funerals was for a man I'll call Joe. I always change names. Joe was of the immigrant generation. Joe came over to this country in the early part of the previous century. And Joe was a typical Jewish immigrant. He came here not knowing the language. He came here having no money. He came here having no family. Why did he come here? To push a cart from somewhere in New York to somewhere in the Midwest. Why? Why did Joe work 18, 20 hours a day? So that his children could have a better life. They could go to college, and his children could become doctors and lawyers and professionals or whatever they wanted to do, whatever their purpose, whatever their dream. That's why he came here. That's why he sacrificed. He didn't keep kosher. He didn't observe Shabbat. He didn't daven, pray on a regular basis. But this man was a great Jew. This man was a great human being. And if there is an Olam Haba, heaven, then he's got a seat at the head of a table. And I did a funeral a few weeks ago for a man named Milt. Milt was the next generation down. Some of your generation, my grandparents' generation, oftentimes we call you the greatest generation. Milt was a man who, when 18 years old, got married. And about 3 months later, he was called by Uncle Sam to head overseas, the South Pacific, and serve. And he was there for 5 years during World War II. And he didn't see his bride one time in 5 years. All they had was pen and paper, sacrificing 5 years of his life to serve, putting his life on the line, risking life and limb. He came home. Many of his compatriots did not. Too many good men and women have died in the service, have risked life and limb and given us life and given us limb so that we would be protected, so that we would be safe, because men and women like Milt have truly been called and stood up and served. He didn't keep kosher. He didn't observe the Shabbat. He didn't pray on a regular basis, at least not the words in the book. But this man was not a good Jew. He was a great Jew, and the kind of Jew that when I grow up, I want to emulate and be like. And this is the essence of our tradition. This is the essence, by the way, of all of our traditions, Judaism and Christianity and Islam and Buddhism and you name it. When you boil it down, if you get to the authentic message of each and every one of them is the idea of la'avod et avodat Adonai, to show up in your lives, in your communities, and serve. It's not about the Messiah. It's not about halakha, Jewish law. It's not about Sharia, Muslim, Islamic law. It's not about yoga mats and zafus and zabatans, meditation pillows and cushions. All of those are means to an end. Yes, kashrut, yes, Shabbat, yes, prayer are all important. They're part and parcel of our tradition, but they are a means. They are always a means, only a means. They are never an end. In the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson, what is religion? To be humble, to think, to love, to do right, and to serve. And we need this message now more than ever before in religion. Teacher of mine, Dennis Prager, says, the antidote to religion done bad is not no religion. What's the antidote to religion done bad, to bad religion? Good religion, authentic religion, religion done right. We have got to claim this idea of avodah, of service, as a religious imperative, a mitzvah. We have got to bring it back into our vocabulary. I think it'll change the nature of what's happening. Because what's happening is, in this community around the country, there is a lack of volunteerism. There is a lack of stepping up and serving on boards, PTAs, city councils, synagogues, right? We need more lay leaders. We need more volunteers. We need people to stand up and to serve. I believe with every ounce of my being that we can achieve this if we bring it back to a religious language, to a religious context, or to do what Abraham Joshua Heschel, the late great rabbi of the previous century, did. He was in Selma, Alabama, literally marching. Everybody says they were marching with Martin Luther King. There's a picture to show that he actually was. Martin Luther King Jr. and Abraham Joshua Heschel. Somebody said to Abraham Joshua Heschel, poking at him, saying, why aren't you up in your ivory tower studying the Talmud? Why aren't you up there in New York, right, praying from your Siddur? And he looked at them baffled, and he said, I am praying right now. I'm here in Selma, Alabama, praying with my feet. This is what avodah, true prayer, is about. We need less praying with our mouths. We need less praying with rituals. We need less avodah through theology. It is time to start praying with our feet. Every time you show up in your marriage and you treat your spouse with a sense of duty and honor and service, you are fulfilling a mitzvah. That is avodah. That is praying with your feet. When you show up at home, not just showing up, but you put down the iPhone, as much as I love it, right? You put down the iPhone, and you show up, and you're there for your kids' homework, or you come home 20 minutes early to do make-believe bedtime story. That is a mitzvah on high, right up there with kashrut and Shabbos and anything else we could do to serve. That is avodah. That is praying with our feet. When you show up and you serve on your federation's board or your synagogue's board, or you attend a funeral of a friend or a friend of a friend, and you take an hour out of your day or an hour out of your night to serve another person, that is avodah, praying with our feet. When you take care of people in your midst, family, friends, strangers, that is praying with your feet. And yes, when you serve this country, as we spoke about earlier, as Maddie spoke about, the great men and women who do serve this country in our National Guard, then you are praying with your feet. But even if you don't serve in the National Guard or the armed forces, you can support those who do. You can support their families. You can serve them as they serve our country, as they serve us. That is praying with our feet. So support Maddie's Mitzvah Project, guardsupport.org, and pray with your pocketbook and pray with your feet. In the words of Martin Luther King Jr., everybody can be great, everybody can be holy, because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to be a Christian or a Jew or a Buddhist or even believe in God to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. You only need to serve. La'avod et avodat Adonai. You simply have to show up and serve. Let me end with the great Rabbi, the great rabbi that I turn to, and his prayer almost weekly at this point. And his name is St. Francis of Assisi. And the Reb St. Francis said, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me serve by sowing love. And where there is injury, let me pardon. And where there is doubt, let me serve through faith. And where there's despair, let me serve through hope. And where there is darkness, let me serve through light. And where there is sadness, let me serve through joy. Ribono shel olam. All right, he didn't say that. He said, Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek as to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving, it is in serving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to life eternal. You want life eternal? You want to get into heaven? Then come down from your theologies, put aside your judgments, set aside your yoga mats or your meditation cushions, keep kosher, observe Shabbos, but know this, that none of it compares to the true avodah, the true act of service. None of it is a substitute for serving our fellow man, serving our fellow woman, serving our fellow human being. La'avod et avodat Adonai. It is time to serve through praying with our feet. Amen. Shabbat shalom.